The beast in the cage, they called her untamable. They said she was dangerous, wild, broken. Her name was Karen, and she was not like the others. She sat in a cold metal cage, deep inside a Vakari warship. The lights were dim, the air smelled. Like oil and rust, her hands were chained, her mouth was sealed. Guards passed by her without looking. They were afraid to meet her eyes. Karen had not spoken for days. Not because she couldn't, but because no one listened. Her own people feared her too much. They didn't treat her like a soldier. They treated her like a weapon they didn't want to use. Once Karen had friends, a family, but everything changed when the Vakari found out what she could do. They tested her, locked her up, and gave her one name, Untamable. Now she was being transported. The war was going badly. The enemy, the butchers of Talrox, were close, so the Vakari made a deal. Give them Karen, and maybe they would be spared. She was thrown into the cage like trash. The Vakari didn't even say goodbye. They wanted her gone, and the butchers wanted blood. But someone else was on the ship. A human, tall and quiet, with a face full of old scars. His name was Sergeant Elias Drake. He was a war advisor from Earth. Watching the Vakari fight and fail, Elias had seen many things in war: monsters, bombs, lies, and leaders with fake smiles. But he had never seen a prisoner like Karen. When he passed her cage, he stopped. She looked up at him, eyes tired but not afraid. "Is that the one?" Elias asked a nearby officer. "Yes," the officer replied. "Nervous? She's the untamable one. A failed hybrid experiment. Dangerous, broken." Elias didn't speak. He just stared at her for a long time. Karen stared back. In that moment, something passed between them. Not words, not fear, something else. Understanding, maybe. "You're wasting a weapon," Elias said finally. Then he walked away. Later that night, Karen felt the ship shake. They had arrived at the battlefield. The cage opened. The guards pulled her out roughly. They pushed her toward the ramp like she was nothing. Outside, the planet was fire and ash. Dead trees, broken rocks, and smoke that made the air thick. The Vakari left her there, alone, in chains. "Let her die," the general said. "She's not one of us." The ship lifted into the sky, leaving Karen behind from a distance. Elias stood on a cliff, binoculars in hand. He had stayed behind. Without orders, he watched her walk into the valley, watched her disappear into the smoke. Then the ground shook again. The butchers of Talrox had arrived. Massive beasts with burning red eyes and steel armor. They smelled blood, they saw Karen, and they charged. Karen didn't run. She closed her eyes, whispered something no one could hear. "I'm not afraid anymore." The butchers reached her. They raised their blades. And then a blinding flash, a sound like 100 storms breaking the sky. The ground cracked, the fire turned blue, and when the smoke cleared, Karen stood alone. The butchers were gone, only dust and silence remained. From his cliff, Elias lowered his binoculars slowly. He smiled, just a little, untamable. He whispered, "No, she's something else, far below." Karen looked up at the sky. Her chains were broken. Her eyes glowed like stars. They had tossed her to the butchers. They had called her a monster, but something had awakened, and this was only the beginning. Karen stood in the middle of the smoking field. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. The butchers were going to turn to ash and memory, but her heart was heavy. She had survived. But what did that mean? She didn't want to be a killer, but they had left her no choice. Her breath came slowly, one step at a time. She walked forward, past the burnt armor and shattered ground. The sky above was dark and red, like the planet itself was bleeding. Behind a broken ridge, a human figure watched her. Sergeant Elias Drake stood hidden, his eyes sharp. He had seen everything. He knew power when he saw it. But Karen didn't know he was there. She thought she was alone. Alone again, just like always. The wind picked up, carrying dust and pain. Karen fell to her knees. Her body was weak, her head spinning. The power inside her had taken too much. Her vision blurred, and she collapsed into the dirt. Time passed, the fires faded, and in the silence, footsteps came near. Karen opened her eyes slowly. She saw boots, dusty and worn. Then a canteen was held out to her. Water, clean and cool. She blinked, confused. The hand holding the canteen was not Vicari. It was human. "You look terrible," Elias said, his voice calm. Karen stared at him, unsure if he was real. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice dry. "To watch you die," he said. "But you didn't." She took the water, drank slowly. "Why help me?" Elias sat down beside her. "I've seen what they do to people like you," he said. "The Vicari don't want weapons they can't control." Karen looked at her hands. Burn marks ran up her arms. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered. "I know," Elias replied. "Neither did I." There was silence between them. Not the cold silence of fear, but the quiet of understanding. "Who were they?" Karen asked finally. "The butchers?" Elias nodded. "They're not just killers," he said. "They harvest minds, steal memories, turn soldiers into slaves." Karen closed her eyes. "I felt something when they got close," she said. "Like they were pulling at my mind." Elias nodded again. "That's what they do." "But you pushed back," he added. "You broke their grip, and then you broke them." She didn't speak. She didn't want to think about it. But the silence was broken by a sound as sharp. Distant hum. Elias stood up quickly, his hand on his weapon. "Drones," he said. Vicari Karen tried to rise, but stumbled. Elias caught her arm. They saw the explosion. He said, "They'll come for you now." "For me?" She asked. "They threw me away." "Not anymore," Elias replied. "Now they know what you can do." The hum grew louder. Drones appeared in the skies, sleek and fast. Searching, Elias pulled her into the shadows of a ruined bunker inside. It was dark and full of broken tech. They found a corner, sat against the wall. Karen was quiet, thinking, "What happens now?" she asked. Elias looked at her with tired eyes. "Now?" "Ha," he said. "Now we run." "But why?" she asked. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Kaza leaned his head back, staring at the ceiling. "Because I've been used to," he said, "thrown out when I wasn't useful anymore, because someone once saved me, and maybe it's my turn to do the same." Karen said nothing, but she didn't look away. Outside, the drones scanned the area, lights flashing, sensors buzzing. The Vicari were looking for their lost weapon. But Elias and Karen were already moving. They crept through the ruins, avoiding the searchlights step by step, breath by breath. And as they disappeared into the dust and shadows, one thing was clear. This was no longer a war between empires. It was something else now, something personal. The girl they had thrown away, the one they called a beast, she had survived the butchers. She had met a human, and together they were about to become something no one expected. The sun never rose on that planet. The sky stayed red, as if frozen in war. Ash fell like snow, and the air smelled like old fire. Karen and Elias moved quietly through the ruins. The drones were behind them, still hunting, but Elias knew how to hide. He had done it many times before. They found shelter in an old Vicari supply station, half buried under stone. Inside, it was cold and silent. No one had been there for years. Karen dropped to the ground, exhausted. Elias sat across from her, watching her closely. Her skin was pale. Her arms still showed burn marks, but her eyes were sharper now, not afraid, not broken awake. "I thought humans left after the alliance failed," she said. Elias shrugged. "They did, But you're still here, she said. He gave her a slow nod. I stayed. Why? Elias didn't answer right away. He took out a small device from his belt. It showed a map of the area, blinking red in several places. They think you're a weapon, he said. They think they made you. Karen looked down. I don't even know what I am, she whispered. I was born in a lab. It gave me numbers, not a name. Elias leaned forward. I've seen that kind of cruelty before, he said. Earth went through something like this. Before the Galactic War, he paused. The Vakari used our tech, our DNA. They wanted to create something powerful, something fast and loyal. But loyalty can't be built in a lab. Karen met his eyes. So I'm not just Vakari. No, he said. There's human inside you. She felt her heartbeat slow. Like something inside her had just clicked into place. That's why I feel different, she said. That's why they hate me. Elias nodded. They don't hate you because you're dangerous, he said. They hate you because you're not fully theirs. Karen didn't cry. She had no tears left. But something heavy fell from her chest. Like a secret she had carried her whole life without knowing. Suddenly, a noise came from above. Not a drone, this was heavier. Louder, a ship. Elias stood up, grabbed his weapon. He peered through a crack in the wall. Vakari troops were landing. Too many, too fast. They're not here to capture you, he said. They're here to erase you. Karen's fists clenched. She could feel the power again, building in her chest. Burning under her skin like fire. I won't go back in. A cage, she said. Elias nodded. Good, because this time we fight. They moved quickly, deeper into the tunnels under the station. Old machines lined the walls, some human, some Vakari. They stopped at a locked door. Elias connected a power cell to the console. The door slid open slowly, revealing a hidden room. Inside were crates sealed. Containers marked with human military symbols. Elias smiled. I left these here. Just in case, Karen opened one crate. Inside were weapons, armor, old Earth tech. She touched one of the rifles. It felt like it belonged in her hands. What? Were you before this? She asked. Elias put on a chest plate. I was a soldier, he said. Then a ghost, and now? She asked. Now I'm your backup, he said with a grin. They geared up outside. The Vakari were spreading through the ruins. One group entered the station, searching room by room. Karen stood beside Elias. No longer the girl in chains, she was something new now. Not a weapon, not a mistake, something born of two worlds. The first Vakari soldier entered the hall. Karen stepped forward, her hand raised. A pulse of blue light flashed silent, clean, and final. The soldier dropped. No scream, no time. Elias looked at her, impressed. You're learning fast, he said. I've had good motivation, she replied. They moved as one, clearing the halls. The Vakari hadn't expected resistance, not from her. She had been tossed to die, and now she was fighting back in the chaos. One Vakari officer escaped and sent a signal. A warning, the human didn't leave. The hybrid lives. They're fighting together, somewhere far away on a Vakari warship. A general heard the message. His face turned pale. They were never supposed to meet. He whispered, but it was too late. The human had stayed. The hybrid had awakened, and together. They had just become the spark no one saw coming. The night was silent again, but it was the kind of silence that hides danger, not peace, somewhere in the distance. Engines hummed in the sky. War was still out there, still watching, still hungry. Elias and Karen sat near a small fire deep inside an underground hideout. They had escaped for now, but safety was just a pause, not a promise. Karen held an old Vakari device in her hands. It had been pulled from the arm of a fallen officer, A black cube with a glowing core used only by High Command, encrypted, Elias muttered. "Can you open it?" Karen asked. "Not me," he said, "but I know someone who can." They stared at the cube. If the Vakari wanted her dead this badly, then there had to be more to her story, more they were hiding. You ever feel like a piece in someone else's? Game. Elias asked quietly. Karen nodded. All my life, far above them, on the Vakari capital ship Vrelok, High General Sava stood before a massive screen. Her sharp fingers tapped a console, zooming in on a red planet, Operation Ashfall. "Has failed," an officer said nervously. "The hybrid survived," Sava's eyes narrowed. "And the human?" "He's still with her." "Of course he is," she whispered. The humans never know when to quit. Behind her, a Vakari scientist stepped forward. He carried a datapad full of hidden files. "General, we have a problem," he said. She accessed the central grid before escaping. She may have seen the Project Chimera files. Sava didn't move. Then, slowly, she turned. "Prepare a strike team," she said, "and wipe every lab that ever touched the project." "But what about the others?" the officer asked. Sava replied coldly. "There can be no others." Back on the ground, Elias and Karen walked through the ruins of an abandoned Vakari science station. Nature had started to reclaim the place. Roots crawling through cracked floors, walls falling apart. Inside, it was cold. But Karen felt warm and restless-like. Something familiar lived in the walls. "Why does this place feel strange?" she whispered. Elias looked around. "Because this might be where you were made." They found a sealed room with shattered glass tubes and broken restraints. In the center, a chair with wires still hanging from it. Karen stepped forward slowly. Her fingers touched the metal armrest. Suddenly, memories, flashes, pain. She saw lights above her, needles in her skin. Voices arguing in a language she barely remembered. One voice, softer than the rest, said, "She's not a weapon. She's a child." Karen stumbled back. Elias caught her before she fell. "It's okay," he said. "You don't have to remember everything today." But Karen's hands were shaking. "What am I?" she asked. Elias didn't answer right away. Instead, he handed her the decrypted file, cube now open. She read the words on the screen. Project Chimera, Hybrid Experiment Series. Human Vakari DNA Fusion Prototype. K1REN Asset. Status: unstable, unpredictable, terminated status error. Her eyes widened. "They didn't just make me," she whispered. "They made others." Elias scrolled through the files. Names, numbers, test results. But only one still marked active. Her. "They erased the rest," Elias said. "Maybe you were the only one strong enough to survive." Karen felt her legs go weak. She sat on the floor, heart pounding. Then, "I'm the last." "No," Elias said, his voice firm. "You're not the last. You're the one who got away." Just then, an alert flashed on Elias's Comsan incoming transmission. It was scrambled, but clear enough. "This is Echo Station. Do you read? We picked up Vakari chatter strike teams are active, targeting old labs." Karen stood up quickly. "They're destroying everything. They want to erase proof I ever existed." Elias grabbed his rifle. "They're cleaning house," he said, "and you're the last room on the list." Karen's eyes glowed faintly. Not with fear, with purpose. "They think I'm still playing their game," she said, "but I'm done being a pawn." She turned to Elias. "Let's go ruin the board." In the shadows of war, plans were being rewritten. The Vakari had tried to hide their sins, but Karen had survived, and now she knew the truth. She was not just a tool, or a test, or a freak. She was a player now, and it was her move next. The air was sharp with smoke. The sky was darker than before. Something had shifted, not just in the war, but in Karen herself. She was no longer asking, "What am I?" Now she was asking, Why did they make me? And more importantly, what were they afraid of? They traveled fast through broken canyons and silent cities, old battlefields abandoned by both the Vakari and their enemies. But Elias had a destination in mind, a place off the grid, buried in the earth, unknown to most. Where are we going? Karen asked as they climbed a narrow path, somewhere they hoped you'd never find. Elias said, a forgotten lab where Project Chimera began. 2 days later, they arrived at the edge of a frozen wasteland. Buried under ice and steel was a black facility sealed by codes older than the war itself. Elias punched in the entry sequence by memory. Karen stood quietly beside him. She could feel something calling from below. Not a voice, but a pull, a sense of unfinished purpose. The door opened with a heavy groan. Inside, it was cold, dead, and filled with dust. But the machines, they were still humming, still waiting. They moved through the halls, past broken screens and dry blood. Then they reached the central chamber, a vault. On its surface, the symbol of Chimera, half eagle, half serpent. Below it, a line etched in metal, perfection through fusion. Inside the vault were records files that had never been erased. Karen accessed the data, her fingers shaking. She saw footage dozens of test subjects like her, some screaming, some crying, some already gone. One video played without her touching it. A child's eyes glowing blue, speaking softly. I just want to go home. Karen stepped back, her voice hollow. I wasn't the first. Elias nodded slowly. No, he said. You were the last. They found more details about the project's secret funders. It wasn't just the Vakari. There were human names too. Old Earth officials who had vanished after the first contact wars. Elias stared at the files, his jaw tight. This wasn't just science, he said. This was a plan. A way to build a soldier who could fight both sides. Karen clenched her fists. They didn't want peace, she said. They wanted control, behind them. A soft click echoed the sound of a weapon being armed. Elias turned instantly, rifle up. A figure stood in the doorway. Not Vakari. Not Butcher, something else. It was one of the other test subjects' soldier. Scarred, but alive. His voice was calm. So, you finally came back. Karen froze. She recognized him, not his name, but his presence. Rovik. She whispered. They said you died. I did, he said, stepping closer. Then I woke up in pieces and put myself back together. They left me here to rot, but I waited. Elias kept his weapon raised. What do you want? Rovik looked at Karen. You left, he said. You escaped while the rest of us burned. I didn't know, she said quietly. I thought I was alone. He nodded. Slowly. You were, he said. But not anymore. Rovik walked to the center of the room. He connected to the system with a neural port on his arm. Lights flickered. Then a new screen opened. It showed Earth, a warning. Blinking red. Incoming strike vector, ship detected, primary target. Human genetic source, they found out. Rovik said, they know your DNA came from Earth. They're going to erase the origin. Karen felt her stomach twist. Earth. Never knew, she said. They never gave me a choice. But we can warn them, Elias said. We can get to a relay station. Rovik stepped back from the console. I'm not leaving this place, he said. I'm the evidence. But you can still change the story. Karen reached out her hand. Come with us, she said. Rovik smiled, sad and tired. No, he said. My part in the game is done, as they left the lab. Karen looked back. One last time, she had found answers, but they came with a price. Project Chimera had created monsters. But it had also created something the universe had never seen. A weapon with a heart, a soldier with choice. A girl born from two species and loyal to neither, far above. The Vakari fleet was moving, and Earth had no idea what was coming. But Karen did, and this time she wouldn't run. The stars above Earth were silent, but something moved in their shadows. A fleet of Vakari warships hidden behind the dark side of the moon. Waiting, watching, preparing to strike. Back on the ground, Karen stood beneath a dying sky, her skin bruised, her heart heavy. But her eyes, those strange, glowing eyes, were filled with purpose. "They're going to erase Earth," Elias said. "Checking his gear, they'll frame it as an accident, a failed human reactor. No one will know it was revenge." Karen didn't blink. "Then we give Earth the truth before they bury it." Together, they headed for the last human relay station, still active in the outer zone. It was an old signal tower buried beneath a mountain of rock and ice. If they could reach it, they could broadcast across systems. They could expose Project Chimera, warn Earth, and stop the Vakari's lies. But the Vakar were already hunting. Strike drones swept across the valleys like metal insects. Soldiers moved silently through old ruins, scanning for heat and breath. And now, the butchers were back, too smarter, stronger, more connected. Elias checked his weapon and turned to Karen. "You don't have to do this," he said, but she stepped forward, eyes fixed on the mountains ahead. "I was made to follow orders," she said, "but now I make my own." High above, aboard the Vakari flagship, General Sava watched the planet below. A single light on her map was blinking. Subject K1 Ren, active, resisting, approaching signal tower. "Why won't she die?" one officer asked. Sava didn't answer. She had underestimated the girl, and worse, she had underestimated the human who stayed. The journey to the tower was brutal. Snowstorms tore across the path. Cliffs broke under their boots, and every night, Karen dreamed of the Labouv wires, pain, and her own screams. But every time she woke, she remembered Rovik. He had stayed behind to give her a chance. She would not waste it. As they reached the base of the mountain, the signal tower came into view, tall, thin, and half buried in ice. Lights blinked weakly from its top like a dying heartbeat. "Once we're in, you have 5 minutes," Elias said. "After that, they'll scramble everything." Karen nodded. "Then let's make every second count." They moved fast, climbing broken stairs and crossing frozen beams. Karen moved, like wind, silent and sharp, but just before reaching the broadcast core, the air changed. A low hum spread through the tower, and from the far side of the room, something stepped into the light. It wasn't a soldier. It was something else. Tall, armored in black flesh and steel, eyes glowing with the same strange light as hers, but wrong-twisted. "What is that?" Elias asked, stepping back. Karen froze. She knew. "It's the final version," she whispered. "The one they made after me." The creature spoke, but its voice echoed like metal. "You failed your purpose," it said. "You were too human, Karen. Stepped forward, unafraid, and you have no soul." The creature charged fast, brutal. The tower shook as they collided. Blue and red light flashed as power met power. Elias activated the transmitter while the battle raged. He entered the broadcast codes. The signal began to rise. "Karen," he shouted, "now." She broke free from the creature's grip and ran to the core, but it followed, ready to strike, in a final burst of energy. She grabbed the enemy and jumped, throwing both of them down into the power chamber below. The blast lit up the sky. The signal tower exploded with light, and the message spread across nearby systems, across satellites and hidden channels. The truth spilled out: files, names, video. Project Chimera was no longer a secret. Earth now knew everything. When Elias woke, he was lying on the ice. The tower was gone, the snow falling gently. He sat up, coughing, calling her name, Karen. No answer, only silence. But then, through the mist, she walked toward him, slowly, carefully. "Burned and bloody but alive." "You didn't die," he said. Shocked, she smiled weakly. I'm hard to kill. He helped her sit down. The stars above were clear for the first time, as if the planet itself had been waiting. You did it, Elias said. You stopped them. No, Karen whispered. We stopped them. The untamable had risen, not as a weapon, not as a mistake, but as a voice, a warning, and a symbol. They made her to be silent, obedient, and useful, but she became something else. She became free. The truth spread like wildfire, from colony to colony, from system to system. What the Vicari tried to hide was now known across the stars. Project Chimera, human DNA used without consent, children created in secret labs, trained as weapons, discarded like trash, and one girl, Karen, had survived it all. On Earth, people watched the footage in silence. They saw her escape, saw her fight, saw her speak her name, not with rage, but with strength. I am not a monster. I am not a weapon. I am not yours. In the halls of power, humans argued whether she was a threat. But the people's soldiers, civilians, survivors already knew the truth. She had stopped a war. She had saved them. Karen stood on a cliff now, far above the clouds. The wind touched her skin, soft and warm. For the first time in her life, she felt no chains, no voices in her head, no orders to follow. Beside her, Elias looked out at the sky. Earth's blue curve was visible from here, bright, whole, alive. You're famous now, he said. Karen raised an eyebrow. Do they still think I'm dangerous? Elias laughed once. Some do, he said. Some always will. She didn't seem surprised. I'm not what they expected, she said. No, Elias replied. You're better. The Vicari were no longer united. After the truth came out, rebellions broke across their systems. Scientists were arrested, generals overthrown. The old empire collapsed like a dying star. But not everyone was happy. Some blamed Karen for the fall. Others worshipped her like a god. She wanted neither. I didn't do this for power, she said once in a speech. I did it so no one else has to grow up in a cage. In the months that followed, Earth sent envoys to her location, not soldiers, not spies, just people, doctors, teachers, diplomats. They offered her protection, support, a future. But Karen didn't go to Earth, not yet. I need to build something here, she said. A place for the broken, the hunted, the forgotten. A place where the next child like me doesn't have to fight to be seen. And so, deep in the ruins of a battlefield, she built something new. Not a base, not a lab. A sanctuary. Roviak's memory was carved into the stone wall. Elias stayed by her side, half warrior, half guardian, and slowly the whispers began, not of a monster, but of a protector. One day, a young alien child arrived at the gate, eyes wide, hands shaking. Karen knelt down to meet her gaze. Are you a monster? The girl asked. Karen smiled gently. No, she said, but I used to believe I was. The girl reached out, touched her glowing hand, and smiled. You look like a hero, she said. Elias watched from a distance, arms crossed. She's right, you know, he called. Karen stood up, brushing dust from her clothes. I'm not a hero either, she said. But I'm trying. Years passed, the galaxy changed. New treaties were written. New leaders rose, but in every corner of space where pain still lived, whispers of a place called Sanctum echoed quietly. A home for those used, tossed away, or left behind. And at its heart was the girl they once called untamable. She still trained, still fought, but now for peace, not survival. Her scars remained, but so did her fire. In the end, they had called her many things. Weapon, mistake, threat, beast, but none of it was true. She was never any of those things. She was something far more dangerous to empires and tyrants, a survivor with a choice. A soul with power, a voice that couldn't be silenced. And when the history of the galaxy was written again, her name stood not at the edge of the page, but boldly in the center. They had called her a monster, but she became their savior.